Finish the question.
The question that I have here is, those figures show that you've consistently dropped family class visas. Could one of the reasons be that we have a backlog in family class as of the end of last year of 204,000 be that your government has reduced the number of visas granted in the family class?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sure this has been done not out of malevolence, but just a misunderstanding. But what we've just seen is a classic example of statistical sophistry from Mr. Davies. He did exactly what I predicted he would do. He took 2006 and compared it to 2010, rather than taking averages. Now, Mr. Chairman, in like last year, for example, we had a spike in the federal skilled worker admissions for precise reason. We wanted to, while we were bringing in ministerial instructions, also increase admissions to reduce the backlog in that program. Something similar happened in 1 year on family programs in 2006. But if you actually look at the average admissions under our government, the number of sponsored family members, these are spouses, kids, parents, and grandparents, has been, from 2006 to last year, 63,500. The average number of family-sponsored admissions under the previous 5 years of the Liberal government was 60,000. So there's been actually an increase. For example, among spouses and children, the average under the previous government was 39,935. Under our government, it's been 46,963. And in terms of parents and grandparents, the average admission in that program under the previous government was 17,500, and over the past 5 years under our government, it's been 17,000, essentially flat. So, Mr. Chairman, those statistics are completely misleading.
Well, thanks, Mr. Minister. I mean, they're your figures, and again, I'm not comparing to the previous government. I'm comparing your record.
They've gone up. That's the bottom line.
Can I please finish? I haven't asked a question. Now, one thing you asked about, you used a very cute little analogy with an airplane. Well, one thing that air carriers do sometimes when there's more demand for the people who want to buy tickets is they put on a bigger plane. Have you considered doing that? And I'll just give you a couple facts and ask for your comment. We know that in 5 years, your own department says that we're going to need immigration to fill 100% of our new labor growth. And you've commented on aging population and reduced declining birth rates. That means that we can replace our jobs now with natural growth. But within 5 years, we need immigration to fill 100% for our economy to grow. Have you considered increasing the levels, say, to closer to 1%, 300,000 to 340,000? And I also note that this is something that, when you consulted with people in the summer, you asked, you noted that in the letter to the potential witnesses, you said, although increasing levels would be one way to mitigate some of these pressures, it would require broad buy-in from the public and additional funding. What was that buy-in from the public from your consultations this summer, Mr. Minister, and would you share those, the results of those consultations with the public, with this committee, and tell us if you're prepared as a government to put in additional funding?
Sure. Well, in terms of, there's three questions there, I think, funding, consultations, and the levels. So, in terms of levels, I've received, thank you very much for your letter, and I do appreciate being specific and giving us input on this, Mr. Davies' October 14 letter, where essentially what you suggested is up to 1% of population. That would be 336,000 admissions. Now, first of all, your first question is, have we considered putting on a bigger plane? Yes, we have already done so. We've increased average immigration levels by 14% since, as opposed to the levels under the previous government. Previous government admitted on average 222,500 people. This government has admitted on average 254,000. That is an increase of 14%. Secondly, to go to what you're suggesting, which is 336,000 in fact, would have a negligible effect on backlogs and processing times. And that's really the problem I don't think you're grappling with. I mean, you can have a thoughtful discussion about what's the optimal rate of levels for the Canadian economy or what have you. But in terms of backlog reduction, which I believe is the focus of this study, if you don't significantly limit new applications, moving admissions up to 336,000, as you suggest, won't do the job. But I think you're being a little bit incomplete in the way you're presenting your views, because in the same letter, Mr. Davies, you say that we preferably we urge the government to provide an option to all temporary foreign workers to apply for permanent residency. That would be an additional 140,000 people in the queue. So what you're really saying is 336,000 plus 140,000. That would be 476,000 people. Mr. Davies, if that's what you're advocating, doubling immigration, fine. But I just hope you're transparent about that with your constituents in British Columbia, 80% of whom are saying immigration levels are high enough or too high. In terms of consultations,
Mr. Chairman,
the consultations we did online reflect those public opinion polls. And in terms of funding, as I pointed out, funding will not, if speeding up the processing won't solve the backlog problem as long as admissions exceed, applications exceed admissions.
We're going to have to move on. We're a minute over already, Mr. Lamoureux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. You know, and that's the biggest problem that I find. We have the minister, on the one hand, who says, we want to have this wholesome discussion, and I'm all for that. I have a lot of ideas in terms of how it is that we can improve the system, and I want to be able to participate in improving the system. I think that we need to have dialogue. You know, the study for a number of weeks on the backlog, personally, I'd put that on the back burner and have the Minister of Immigration here, where we can have a roundtable discussion, questions and answers, and be a part of a process that would actually look at coming up with answers so the public would be better served. I spend more time asking questions of the Minister of Immigration at the provincial level when I was an MLA, because time allowed for MLAs to actually thoroughly question and get answers from a minister. Here I'm given 5 minutes to be able to question what affects the lives of millions of Canadians, and I find that that's just not good enough dealing with the backlogs. Having said that, let's take a look in terms of one of the more sensitive issues is in regards to the parents. What we've seen is the lower end of the target has now been reduced for parents. Yet the greatest problem, where we're getting the most phone calls, is in dealing with those backlogs with parents. Yet the targets have been reduced. In fact, if you look at last year, we were at the low end in terms of accepting the number of parents coming in to Canada. So, you know, I have some difficulties in terms of how it is the government has prioritized. I have some ideas in which I would love to share with the minister, and I will share with him, but I only have 5 minutes here. Then, and if you want to give me leave, I'll be more than happy to do that. Mr. Chair, I want to talk about a specific issue in which it talks about backlogs and give a question, a very specific question. Imagine your son is wanting to sponsor you. You're living in the Philippines. You're 50 years old. You have 2 children. One's in university. The other one's in high school. Now you're just getting into the system. You can now expect 7 years today in order to be processed if you're coming from the Philippines. You are obligated to keep your university student in public education until at the time in which you are issued a visa. So that means that at the end of the day, we're saying to that person that they don't have a choice. They can't go into the workforce, because if they do, they lose their dependency. And these are the types of nuances that need to be changed. And this deals strictly with backlogs. So we have people that are put into a position in which, in some cases, they're having to possibly misrepresent themselves because of bad government policy. And my preference, when we have meetings like this, is that this is what we should be talking about, and we shouldn't be constrained to a few minutes of question and answer. Here would be a very specific question that I would ask. Will the minister commit to allowing dependents who have achieved a minimum of a 3-year post-secondary course or a program to remain as a dependent of a principal applicant if the principal applicant has been in the system for a minimum of 12 months? That would then allow, for example, if I'm a parent and I'm being sponsored by my son in Canada, that my child who now has a 3-year degree, but I still have another 5 years before I'm processed, that my child could actually go out and work and support and not have to be worried about being dropped as a dependent. So that's just one example of the types of discussions that I believe that we should have. The minister is right, Mr. Chairperson. It's not a question of resources. We have the resources in the embassies across the world. Our issue is that we have to deal in regards to the number and how we are processing the applications. I don't question that. I do question in terms of to what degree we are being allowed and afforded the opportunity to have that wholesome debate. And that's what the minister says that he wants, a wholesome debate. And I think you have a wholesome debate when you enable opposition critics who have a responsibility that goes broader than their own constituency to ensure that there's accountability in the issue of immigration and citizenship. You have to provide them the opportunity to be able to ask all of the questions, not just limit it to 5 minutes. My question that I would like answered from the minister is, does he agree that we need to open up the system so that there can be questions and better dialogue?
Mr. Lamoureux, thank you very much. Madame Grogui.
Il répond. Ah, OK.
My problem, Mr. Minister, is I'm bound by rules to follow, and unless the committee directs me, you may want to respond to them. My problem is I'm bound by these rules, and unless the committee authorizes me to change those rules, that's the way the cookie crumbles.
On a point of order, Mr. Chairperson?
Point of order, sir.
Mr. Chairperson, I wonder if we could solicit the members of the committee and ask for leave so that the minister could respond in as wholesome as a fashion as he would like to my question.
Well, that's not a point of order. Ms. Grogui.
Monsieur le ministre, donc, ma question concerne les solutions possibles à envisager. Vous parlez de limiter le nombre de nouvelles demandes présentées, éventuellement. Je voudrais savoir quelles catégories seront visées prioritairement si cette solution était adoptée.
Quelle solution?
Celle de limiter le nombre de nouvelles demandes présentées.
Tout d'abord, on a mis en vigueur une limitation des nouvelles applications pour nouveaux demandes, excusez-moi, pour le programme des travailleurs fédéraux qualifiés. Et on l'a fait avec les nouveaux demandes pour le programme d'investissement investisseurs immigrants, excusez-moi. Et troisièmement, nous le mettons en vigueur pour le programme de parrainage des réfugiés privés. Donc, on a déjà, voilà sont les priorités pour utiliser le pouvoir des instructions ministérielles pour limiter le nombre de nouvelles applications. Donc, le seul autre programme où nous n'avons pas utilisé cet outil, où il y a un arriéré significatif, c'est le programme de parrainage des parents et grands-parents. Voilà.
D'accord. En ce qui concerne... d'après vous, est-ce que vous pourriez nous dire quels inconvénients, mais de façon un peu plus exhaustive peut-être, quels inconvénients présente pour vous l'option d'augmenter le nombre d'immigrants comme solution pour éliminer les arriérés? Et je voudrais savoir également, est-ce que dans les options, serait-il possible de les avoir pour mieux comprendre les différentes options que vous aviez envisagées, donc leurs avantages et leurs inconvénients?
Voilà, merci. Comme j'ai dit, Monsieur le Président, le gouvernement globalement a déjà augmenté le niveau d'immigration au Canada par 14% par rapport au niveau de gouvernement précédent. Et on a augmenté même les chiffres pour réunification familiale. Comme j'ai déjà indiqué, à moyen, on l'a augmenté d'environ 40 000 sous le gouvernement précédent à presque 47 000 sur le gouvernement actuel. Mais, comme j'ai dit pendant mon exposé, l'augmentation des admissions dans le programme de parrainage des parents ne réglera pas le problème des arriérés. Même pour doubler le nombre des parents et grands-parents qui arrivent au Canada, d'ici 2018, nous aurons toujours une arriéré d'environ 70 000, avec un doublement des nombres des parents et grands-parents qui arrivent au Canada. Donc, une augmentation des nombres des admissions ne sera pas suffisant pour éliminer les arriérés.
Si on ne parle pas d'augmentation qui aurait un impact donc sur les arriérés, est-ce que dans votre plan, vous prévoyez à ce moment-là une diminution dans certaines catégories en termes d'admission, et lesquelles?